I spent over 50 hours testing ways to make a sorc become a tanky enough to survive higher nightmare dungeons, while at the same time doing enough damage to clear the content quickly. What I've learned will be valuable for anyone who plays a sorc, and I'm here today to share it with you. I'm going to do my best to include footage from all aspects of the gameplay. When finding out the upper limits of survivability, you will quickly discover that there is a balancing act being played out with no clear way to win both sides. My initial solution to this problem was to produce just enough defense to allow me to teleport into a group of enemies and use a pretty interesting combo I found to blow up the mobs before any of the hard hitters had a chance to whack me. This initially worked great, and truth be told, this is a viable strategy to around the level 55 Nightmare Sigil level. At this point we started feeling a little squishy and wanted to break out into a more defensive build to push a little higher. Here's what happened. My first order of business was to rework the Paragon board to take advantage of every defensive node on the boards to get a baseline for damage that can be negated. This included the ice board, which required us to either run the ice boots or use the ice basic attack in one of our enchantment slots in order to proc the ice passives. We tried both, but opted for the basic attack in our enchantment slot as it allowed us to proc chill on most of the enemies we were fighting, and missing out on plus ranks to our defensive skills to shorten their cooldown proved very difficult to manage and required us to run away from mobs while waiting for cooldowns, which just did not feel good to play if I'm being honest. So now we had our most tanky version of the build, which would naturally suffer on the DPS side of things, but we could still run content around our level and slog through higher tier maps if we were patient. The end result was, however, that even though we were hard spec'd into defense as much as possible, we would still fall victim to most of the one-shot mechanics without flame shield or ice armor up in higher tier content. Keep in mind we had taken every possible Paragon point as well as every skill point related to defense in our skill tree as well as the majority of our armor rolls and aspects. So where does that leave us? Can this build be viable? The short answer is yes. For quick clears and content around your level, the more balanced version of this build clears very quickly and is a blast to play. A large amount of patience, however, will be required if your goal is to push ultra high Nightmare Sigils. You can in theory combo in, then run, rinse, and repeat if that is your thing. The more enemies that you get balled up, the more damage you do. There really is infinite scalability with this unique as far as damage goes on large mobs of enemies. The trick is surviving long enough to group them up and get your explosions to proc. In conclusion, I really feel like the sorc is lacking in comparison to other classes. The fact that viability is split between 3 different elements with an important piece of the puzzle in each one, ice carrying vulnerable, fire carrying crit multipliers, and lightning carrying survivability and stun elements for stun damage multipliers, just makes the class difficult to balance if you're using any element outside of ice as your main element of attack. You couple this with the fact that the Paragon board is full of elemental resistance nodes, which at this point in the game's development has very little value, and you end up with a very pigeonholed class and an ice shard meta. While I was debating on whether or not to make this video, I had the thought of all the people out there that must be playing sorc, falling victim to one-shots, and wondering about the survivability options the class had, and I decided to go ahead with it. For anyone that is interested in playing the build link will be in the description. This was a full and honest build guide, which I'm sure will garner some hate from viewers, and that's okay, it's normal. I am a theory crafter at heart, and a firm believer that knowledge should be shared for the betterment of all. As always, thanks for watching, and enjoy life.